Alright guys, welcome back to One Giant's Garage. Today I'm going to show you guys how to remove the front deck assembly on a Snapper Z-Rider. They call it the out front Z-Rider. Basically a front mount zero turn. And cool mower's got the joystick on it instead of the twin controls. Pretty easy process. This was one of the benefits of having this deck mounted out front, was it made it real easy to take off. So I'm going to show you how to take it off. Then we are going to pull the blades off. I got new ones, so show the whole process. Deck coming off, pulling the blades, putting on the new ones, cleaning it up, putting it all back together, and firing it back up. So let's get started. So I'm parking it right here because I'm actually going to come along from there up to that beam just so I can stand the deck up and work on it versus flip it over on the ground. Ideally, you would want this to be a totally flat surface, concrete floor or something like that. I happen to have a big dip right there underneath where it's sitting, which is fine, it'll still work. So raise the deck all the way up, which you can see all the way up. There's a little mark that would come down if it was down. So you come back here, pull these pins, and you'll see there's a couple adjustment holes right there. So get her sitting right there. It's kind of hard to do one-handed. There we go. Put that pin in so you can see the foot. It's kind of hanging out down there. Then you come over here to the other side. Now normally I use, because I'm a hillbilly, I use this bungee cord through this hole to hold this leg up, but I'm going to use that bungee cord to hold up the drive shaft. So, get our trusty handy dandy screwdriver here. Boom. Right there. So now the legs are down. So then you want to move, there's a couple of latch pins up here. I see these here. Pull that out, spin it up. Same thing over here, pull it out, spin it up. And, alright, now we need to actually lower the deck. And you'll see, minus all the beeping, these arms should lift right up out of the holders. See, you hook it back up, look up, it back in, pull it out, they pick up. So then we need to remove this drive shaft right here. I'll pull that out and get back with you. Alright, so the way that drive shaft comes off, you just pull back on this coupler. It's just too hard to do one-handed. And then you unhook this electrical connection to the deck. It just runs the height adjuster. Now, normally you would start this up and just drive it backwards, but it's a little uneven ground. So what I like to do is, right here is the bypass for the hydros. To bypass that one, and now what that does is makes it so this can roll. And then this is the strong man part. See, this side is just a little bit hung up right there. So we just take our handy dandy pry bar that we didn't have ready, and pop that This is where the part of, if you were working on a flat level surface, this would have already popped free. So I will pop that out, and we will come back. So here's what she looks like all unhooked. And just push the mower backwards away from it. It's a little bit hard getting all that lined up and lifted. I forgot. Really, it's easier if you put, instead of using those stands, just put a floor jack under each side. Problem is, mine are currently tied up with Dirt Diggler over there, so we got her off anyway. So now, got my lifting apparatus up there, hooked up. This just strapped, kind of run willy-nilly through the brackets for the wheels, because I realize I also don't have the proper stuff for lifting. So now I am going to raise this up with a chainsaw, and we'll be right back, because you don't need to hear all that ratcheting that does absolutely no good. Alright, so there she is, all jacked up, the old faithful chain hoist. So while I got it up in the air, I like to test these, see if they got any wiggle to them. None. That could mean bad bearings if you got a bunch of wiggling going on. And none. Cool. So next step, get your proper size socket. I like to use an impact for this, because that way you don't have to worry about holding the blade. And I always like to give just a couple little drops. Standard Harbor Freight air tool oil. I never used to, but I'll tell you what I do now. And I actually use high flow couplers on all of my air tools. Just seems to make them work better. I think they call them the Milton V's or something. And I can still plug a standard one into this coupler, but you can't plug this into a standard coupler. So set that on. Oh, this is hard to do with one hand. Set that on reverse. One. Two. Three. So you can kind of see why I went and got new blades. So the last time I mowed, I kind of went in some areas that I hadn't in a long time. Found a bunch of rocks I hadn't seen in a long time. So, and believe it or not, it still cut fairly decent. So we are going to get these off, get them on the table, and then see if I got the right ones. Alright, so here's the old blades sitting next to the new ones. First thing I noticed right off the bat is, see, the old blades were, I assume this is a mulching style blade. You see how far it's sharpened all the way down here. Now that's usually not necessary, because given the ground speed and the speed of the blades, you typically only use this much of the blade anyway, which is why These apparently cheaper blades only sharpen right this very end right here. And if you look, most of your wear is up to about here. So a little bit further than these are sharpened, but not too bad. So, old ones are just shy of 21 inches. New ones, just shy of 21 inches, so that part's right. Old ones, center hole, about 5/8. New ones, center hole, it's actually about 5/8. Piece of paper stuck in there. So, looked like the right ones. So we'll get that deck cleaned up, get these mounted back up, and see what she does. So one other thing I wanted to point out that I did not realize until I took this off, because it's actually the first time I've done blades on this. So those bolts that hold the blades on actually come all the way through the pulleys, and there's nuts on this side. So when we go to put it back together, we'll just put a wrench on this side and hold that nut. So did not realize that. This side, you just pop those 5 nuts off, pull that top cover off, and that gets you that right there. So now back to this side. So what you do is take your basic scraper. I'm using a chisel here, but they sell wider scrapers that go faster, but I'm not in a rush. It's hot out here again. So you just go through and scrape off all that dried grass and nasty that's stuck on here to get it on a nice clean metal, and then put it all back together. So I'm going to go on scraping, and I'll be back when I'm done. One thing I did want to point out about this deck, even compared to my X Mark, there's very, very little accumulation on the underside of the grass wadding up. Even my X Mark, I literally would have to crawl underneath and scrape that thing every other time I mowed with it. And I've mowed, I think 4, maybe 5 times with this, and this is all I've gotten. And there's been some pretty deep times where there's a whole lot of grass when I mow, and that usually wads it all up. So I will get this cleaned up, and we'll be right back. So here's another tip that I forgot to tell you before I started doing it. Once a year, normally I do it right before I put the mower up for the year. Go through and clean the whole deck off, the underneath, and spray it with whatever spray paint you got. It doesn't matter. I just happen to have, you know, a can of Rust-Oleum white sitting around. Because once you start scraping on that deck, you're going to scrape paint off every time you scrape it. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, there's no getting around it. So by spraying the deck, it also makes the surface of the deck slicker, so it's harder for the grass to stick to it once the paint sets up and cures. Always use gloss paint. Don't use like matte finish or anything like that, because that's almost got a texture to it. You want it to be absolutely as smooth as possible. Now, I did not prep this deck at all for this. I just happened to think, I got a can of paint here, I'll do it while I got it apart. Normally you would take a wire wheel to this whole thing, because you can see everywhere that's gray, that's basically dried grass that's stuck on the deck that escaped the scraper. Because I mean, it's a scraper, it's not a miracle worker. So there's a lot of parts of this that the paint won't stick at all, but that's all right, because everywhere that was exposed bare metal obviously didn't have grass on it, so now it's got paint on it and it won't rust. So that's kind of the point. So I'm gonna let that set up for a little bit so I don't get all tacky, and then I am going to get the blades. We'll get those back on and wrap this bad boy up. Alright, so here's the final hurrah. I already put those 2 on because I only need to show you once. So take your blade, put your bolt. Now your bolt will have a washer right there by the head, and then you'll have 4 spacers. Now you can adjust the height of this blade by either putting these spacers below it or above it, or like, you know, two above, two below, move it down half the distance or whatever. I'm not too worried about that. So we're just gonna put all four back on like they was. And take that bad boy. Throw it in here. Blam, just like that. And this nut goes on the back side. See, this is where the bolt comes through. Get that started on there. Actually run it pretty much all the way down. So on this mower, obviously, you know, this thing's 20 years old or better. Somebody had replaced probably this bolt right here and that bolt down there, probably when they put new spindles on it at some point. So these are coarse thread bolts. That this one here, which I'm guessing is the original, is a fine thread. So I screwed up. I couldn't get these threaded, and I was like, oh, them are different bolts. So always pay attention to what nuts come off what bolts. So I will run this down with the impact, and that will be it. Make sure when you put these on, this side is down and this curve up should always go up towards the deck, away from the ground, because what happens is cuts the grass, it hits this ramp and it kind of throws it up and then just keeps on cutting, it just falls back down. So don't forget that part. So I'm going to get this bolted back up and then wait for this to dry, and then we'll put it back together. So it's all back together. Sorry I didn't get to show you the last part of it. It required too many hands. I couldn't hold the phone. So what it boiled down to was, one of the advantages of this style machine right here, with that joystick control and having none of the safety switches still connected, is I hooked that, come along, or whatever. What do you call that? Chain hoist. I hooked this chain hoist with that strap to the arms down here, and then what I did was lifted it up, and then with this thing running, I could steer it like this and just walked it right into those arms. You flip those catches back down in their holders, that just keeps that knob from popping out. Hook that shaft back up, plug your deck lift back in, and brothers and sisters, she is good to go. Throw your seat pad back, the foot pad back down, and you're ready to ride. So now, kind of see underneath, we got a nice clean deck, brand new shiny blades, and she is ready to mow. So she'll be good to go, and that wraps that little adventure up. 120,000 degrees out in this barn. I got my big giant fan, but I can't have that running while I'm making a video. So that wraps this one up. Tune in next time. We will be starting work on a new walk behind for doing ditch banks in the hills and stuff. That ought to be fun. So all right, thanks for watching. Leave me a comment.